Welcome to Trending Unpacked, the show where we break down what everyone is talking about and why.
And if you've been on, well, any social media platform recently, or maybe even just looked up at the night sky, you probably know what we're talking about.
Oh, absolutely. The Northern Lights, the Aurora Borealis.
But not just any aurora. This was different. This was something special.
Exactly. I mean, we all know what the lights are, but this wasn't just, a few stunning photos from Iceland or Norway.
No, not at all.
It felt like it was everywhere. It completely took over global feeds because it showed up so far from home.
Far from home is a good way to put it. We're talking about people in places that are nowhere near the poles, who have never seen this before, suddenly getting this incredible light show in their own backyards.
It really did transform it from like a niche traveler's dream into this massive, trending, worldwide thing that everyone was a part of.
It's the perfect storm, really. You have this incredibly high-level solar activity, which is unusual in itself. And it meets the instant communication of our modern world. When you start looking at the data, the science, the reason for it is actually pretty simple on the surface.
Okay.
The sun basically threw a massive punch, and our planet's defenses reacted by putting on a light show that expanded way, way toward the equator.
And that's why it went viral. It just completely defied everyone's expectations of where you should be able to see it.
At the same time, for millions of people.
Okay, let's get into the mechanics of it. I mean, the lights usually stick to the polar regions, like Alaska, Scandinavia, that sort of thing.
That's their home turf, yes.
So what cosmic event, or was it a series of events, what was so powerful that it pushed the aurora into these much lower latitudes? I mean, stunning people all over the world.
It was definitely a series of events. We're talking about space weather at its most intense. The immediate cause was a recent, extremely strong chain of geomagnetic storms.
And that's not just a standard solar flare, is it?
No, this is a whole other level. These were the result of multiple really powerful coronal mass ejections. We call them CMEs for short.
CMEs, okay.
And several of them happened in quick succession, all aimed, more or less in our direction.
A coronal mass ejection, just for anyone who hasn't followed this before, sounds pretty intimidating. Is it basically the sun just blasting material out into space?
That is precisely what it is. Imagine the sun has this huge, complex magnetic field.
Right.
And sometimes those magnetic field lines, which are these colossal invisible structures, they suddenly snap and then reconnect.
Like a rubber band snapping.
Exactly like that, but on a star-sized scale. And when that magnetic reconnection happens, it launches billions of tons of magnetized plasma-charged particles out into space.
Billions of tons.
At speeds that can top 5 million miles per hour. A CME is quite literally a chunk of the sun's atmosphere flying through space.
And when a cloud that big, moving that fast, hits our planet's magnetic field, I imagine that's quite a collision.
It's a massive shockwave. Earth's magnetic field, the magnetosphere, is our shield. And it does a fantastic job almost all the time.
But this was not most of the time.
No. When a CME, this energetic and magnetized, hits, it doesn't just bump into the shield. It compresses it dramatically. It's like a cosmic fist squeezing a balloon.
So the shield doesn't break, but it gets squished. It deforms under all that pressure.
That's a much better way to put it than saying it's overpowered. The magnetosphere gets compressed on the side facing the sun, and then all that energy and plasma gets funneled around to the back.
The back.
Yeah, into what we call the magnetotail. It's the long, sort of comet-like tail of our magnetic field that stretches away from the sun.
Aye.
And all that energy transfer causes another magnetic reconnection event, but this time on the night side of Earth, which then shoots those particles back toward the poles with incredible force.
So if I'm picturing this right, the magnetic field lines, instead of being in their usual stable shape, are getting violently shaken and distorted.
That's an excellent analogy, like shaking a rope. And that distortion is the absolute key.
Why is that?
Because normally the auroral oval, that's the ring around the poles where these particles rain down into the atmosphere, it stays pretty tight.
Right, up north.
But when you get a G4 or a G5 level storm, which is what we just had, the magnetic field is so compressed and energized that the boundaries of that oval just balloon outward. They get pushed dramatically toward the equator.
And that explains the incredible geographical reach. I mean, we were seeing reports from places that haven't seen an aurora in decades.
Or ever, for some people.
We're talking Colorado, huge parts of Europe like Italy and France, all over the UK, Japan. And I even saw reports from Northern Australia.
Which is just staggering. That massive footprint is what drove the global trend.
Right.
And you have to remember the difference between geographic latitude and geomagnetic latitude. Italy, for instance, is geographically very far south. But because the Earth's magnetic pole isn't perfectly lined up with the geographic North Pole, some of these places are magnetically a bit closer to the action than you'd think. And a storm this severe just closes that gap.
So you have these huge, unexpected populations all seeing the same thing at once.
And that's where modern technology just takes over.
If this had happened, say, in the early 2000s, it would have been a few scattered reports on the local news in Denver or Rome. A curiosity.
Absolutely, a blip. But now it's instantly global. It's verified in seconds.
And the quality of the images.
That's the accelerant, isn't it? The rarity of the event is the foundation, but the amplification comes from the tech in our pockets. We're not talking about grainy old photos.
No, these were incredible.
We're talking about modern smartphones with night modes and long exposure settings that can capture the full range of colors. Even the faint pinks and deep reds that your naked eye might just see as a kind of whitish haze.
The technology almost enhanced reality for us. You see this vibrant picture on your phone, this amazing TikTok time-lapse, and it makes you run outside to check your own sky.
Exactly. It creates that immediate global feedback loop. The viral content formats, the time-lapses of the lights dancing, the crystal-clear stills. It turned a news story into an urgent, shared global moment.
And the consensus seems to be that we should probably get used to it.
It does, which brings us to the bigger picture.
The larger cosmic rhythm. This wasn't just a random fluke, it's tied to the solar cycle. But before we get to that, let's break down the pure physics. What is actually making the light?
Right.
The solar particles are invisible, the collision happens way up in space. So why do we see these beautiful, colorful curtains?
That is the absolute heart of the aurora. So we've established the particles get funneled toward the poles, right?
Yeah.
The light itself happens when those high-energy particles, mostly electrons from the sun, smash into gas atoms and molecules that are already in our upper atmosphere.
So they're hitting stuff that's already there.
Exactly. When a solar electron moving at incredible speed collides with, say, an oxygen atom, it transfers its energy to that atom.
Okay.
This excites the atom, which is a fancy way of saying it forces the atom's own electrons into a higher, more energetic orbit. It's like temporarily bumping them up to a higher shelf.
But things don't like to stay in that high energy state.
Correct. Nature prefers stability. So when those excited electrons drop back down to their original lower energy shelf, they have to release that extra energy they were given.
And that energy comes out as light.
It's released as a photon, a little packet of light. Now, multiply that by trillions and trillions of collisions happening across thousands of square miles.
And you get the aurora.
You get the greatest light show on Earth.
Okay, now the colors. This is what made the recent sightings so spectacular. The green is iconic, but the reds, the pinks, the purples, that's what made a trend. What decides that color palette?
It all comes down to two things. Which gas is being hit, and how high up in the atmosphere the collision happens.
Let's start with the classic, that signature green.
The green is our default aurora, you could say. It's produced when solar particles hit oxygen molecules at relatively lower altitudes. We're talking about 100 to 150 kilometers up.
Okay.
At that altitude, oxygen's pretty abundant, so you get lots of collisions, and the oxygen atom releases that green light fairly quickly after being hit. That's the most common for a reason.
Now for the dramatic ones. The deep blood red colors that were startling people in places like Italy. They looked almost apocalyptic in some photos.
Those reds are also from oxygen, but, and this is the key, it's from oxygen being hit at a much, much higher altitude.
How high?
Generally between 200 and 300 kilometers up. Way up there, the atmosphere is incredibly thin.
So there's less oxygen.
Far less. And because the air pressure is so low, an excited oxygen atom can take a long time, sometimes minutes, to release its energy as red light. You need a really powerful, sustained storm to energize that thin layer of oxygen at that height.
And why do those red lights seem to appear further south than the green ones? I noticed that in the reports.
It's pure geometry. Because those red emissions are happening so high above the Earth, you can see them from much farther away over the horizon.
Ah, because of the Earth's curvature.
Exactly. If you're standing in, say, Colorado, you might not be able to see the lower altitude green light happening over Canada, but you can see the very tall, high altitude red light glowing above it. The red is like a giant celestial flare visible over a huge distance.
And what about the blues and violets? They often seem to be at the bottom edge of the curtains.
Those are primarily from nitrogen. When the solar particles hit nitrogen molecules, usually at lower altitudes, often below 100 kilometers, they produce those beautiful blue and violet hues. It takes very high-energy particles to get that deep into our atmosphere.
So the aurora is basically a visible map of our atmosphere's layers and the energy of the storm.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
What's so important here is that while this felt like a huge surprise, the science suggests it's actually part of a predictable rhythm. This is all linked back to something called solar cycle 25.
This is the context that turns a viral moment into a long-term forecast. Solar activity, sunspots, flares, CMEs, it isn't random. It follows a pretty regular, approximately 11-year cycle.
From a quiet period to a very active one.
From a solar minimum with low activity to a solar maximum with peak activity.
And where are we right now in that 11-year cycle?
We are climbing rapidly toward the peak of solar cycle 25. And what's interesting is that initially, the cycle was predicted to be pretty weak, kind of like the last one.
But that's not what happened.
Not at all. It has turned out to be far more vigorous and is ramping up faster than the early forecasts suggested. We're now heading for a peak somewhere around 2025.
So these recent severe storms that brought the red lights to Italy, they aren't freaks of nature. They're actually signs of a predictable trend toward the solar maximum.
Exactly. This is what we expect to see. It means the chances of large Earth-directed CMEs are just statistically going up. The scientific community is watching this very closely because it suggests we should be ready for more of these events and maybe even more intense ones over the next couple of years.
Which has huge implications for technology and infrastructure. That's where a lot of the online fear came from, right? If a storm is that strong, people immediately worry about power grids and communication satellites.
That's where the online story often jumps from geomagnetic storm to global catastrophe. But the reality is a lot more nuanced.
Okay, let's unpack that. The main concern is something called geomagnetically induced currents, or GICs. What are those?
So a GIC is an electrical current that gets induced here on the ground in long metal conductors.
How does a storm in space do that?
It's pure physics, Faraday's law of induction. When all that plasma from the CME slams into our magnetic field, it makes the field lines vibrate and fluctuate rapidly. A changing magnetic field induces an electric field. And that electric field drives a current, a GIC, through any long conductor, like a power line or a pipeline.
And these currents can be dangerous for our infrastructure.
Very, especially for high-voltage power grids. If a massive GIC flows into the power grid transformer, it can saturate the core, cause it to overheat, and potentially damage or destroy it. That can lead to blackouts.
Like the big Quebec blackout in 1989.
That's the classic example, yes. A direct result of GICs. But the key thing is, we learned from that. Modern grids, especially in high-risk areas, have safeguards built in now.
So the online fears of a total grid collapse are a bit exaggerated.
They tend to ignore the significant engineering that's gone into protecting the grid. It's a genuine risk that operators manage, but not the doomsday scenario you see in the memes.
What about GPS? I saw a lot of talk about planes being rerouted.
Again, it's a real effect, but the context matters. The storm churns up the ionosphere, the layer of the atmosphere that GPS signals travel through.
And that messes with the signal.
It can cause it to scatter or slow down. For your phone's GPS, it might mean a temporary loss of accuracy for a few minutes. An inconvenience.
But for an airplane?
For an airplane flying a polar route where the interference is strongest, a loss of precision from 1 meter to 10 meters is a major safety concern. So rerouting planes is a very real, very prudent safety measure. It shows the risk is being actively and effectively managed.
That's a great distinction.
Yeah.
It's a managed risk, not a catastrophe. And that duality of awe and fear seems to define the whole cultural reaction to this.
It really does. The moment something this big happens, you get this immediate sense of global awe, which then instantly gets translated into humor and, well, memes.
The movie comparisons were everywhere.
Of course. The deep red skies. People immediately went to Stranger Things and The Upside Down, or just general apocalyptic sky movie scenes.
It's like a cultural shorthand for processing something that feels unreal.
It's the fastest way our collective brain can make sense of something that breaks the rules. We fit it into a story we already know.
And the more modern take on that was the big TikTok trend.
The sky is glitching.
Yes, which is such a perfect phrase for it.
It's the perfect modern metaphor, isn't it? It uses the language of technology, a bug in the system, a breakdown in the simulation, to describe this overwhelming natural event. It implies the universe's programming just failed for a minute.
And whenever something gets that much attention, the commercial side isn't far behind. We saw a spike in travel interest, didn't we?
Oh, absolutely. A predictable one. Influencers immediately started promoting Aurora chasing trips. It creates this whole speculative travel market, even though an event like this, at these latitudes, is completely unpredictable.
People want to recapture that viral moment.
Exactly. It shows how powerful that combination of a beautiful, rare event and global social sharing really is.
So we have the physics, the CMEs, the compressed magnetosphere, the 11-year solar cycle, and then we have the cultural response. The awe, the memes, the managed risk. It all comes together in this one massive, synchronized global event.
It really does. On one hand, you have invaluable scientific data for researchers who are tracking this solar maximum.
Right.
And on the other hand, you have this immense social value. It's an event that literally made billions of people in totally different countries and cultures stop what they were doing and look up at the sky at the same time.
It's a powerful reminder of nature's unpredictability.
And its beauty.
That's a perfect way to put it. We've really broken down how a magnetic blast from the sun millions of miles away can physically change the sky for someone in a place they never, ever expected to see it.
And the technology that both warns us of the storm and captures its beauty is part of the very same system that the storm threatens.
That tension is what makes it so fascinating. And our ability to share it instantly globally, that redefines what a shared experience even means.
It absolutely does.
As we get closer to the peak of solar cycle 25, these global auroras might become a bit less of a shock. And that leaves me with a final thought to mull over. How does our ability to share an event like this in real time, an event that just ignores national borders and time zones, how does that change our collective sense of planetary fragility and our interconnectedness? The storm was physical, but the trend was purely digital. And for a moment, it unified us all under one beautiful, shifting sky.
That is a fantastic point for reflection, and one that's going to become more relevant as the sun gets even more active in the next couple of years.
Thank you so much for walking us through the science and the cultural impact of the viral northern lights.
My pleasure. It was fascinating to talk through.
Next episode, we're unpacking why government shutdown is dominating searches, what's happening, what it means, and why everyone's suddenly talking about it.
Looking forward to it.
Until next time.